Hello, visionaries. This is Ryan Haley, and this video is being recorded on January 31st of 2022. And as I'm sure most of you know, the vast majority of people by now have probably already fallen off the wagon, if you will, with their New Year's resolutions. And some different articles and statistics indicate that somewhere between 8 to 16% of people actually maintain and achieve their New Year's resolutions throughout the year. Interestingly, though, I was just reading an article that was saying that even if you don't maintain or follow through on your New Year's resolutions, there is still value to making them. And that's because there's a setting of intentionality, there is positive hope and inspiration and focus that is better than nothing. And that was interesting to me. But as members of this visionary community, I think we all have more aspirations than just to set intentions that we don't keep, as valuable as that may be to the alternative of not setting any intentions. So what are some ways that we can actually stay intentional, stay consistent, build habits and rhythms in our life that keep us on track? And I think that in some of the other articles I read and what in my own personal experience for making and setting or not achieving certain goals is that it's really the little day in, day out habit patterns that aren't that glorious or big, but they're really important and they keep us on track. Now, like most people, one of my big resolutions this year or goals is to get back into a much more consistent exercise and healthy eating routine. I've noticed that I've had a lot of movement and forward progress in my career and profession and financially in the last year or so, but it has come for me at the expense of a more balanced or well-rounded life. So certainly, like most people, getting back in the gym, eating healthy, and just kind of getting back in that rhythm is one of my top goals. But I'd say even bigger than that for me personally, it's maintaining really healthy, deep, and meaningful relationships. It can be really easy sometimes as a visionary, especially when you're actually making a lot of progress towards your goal, that it can kind of have this tendency to narrow and focus, and you're just kind of like looking through a soda straw. And there's absolutely times that we need to have that single-minded focus and intensity almost to the exclusion of all else. But what I've found in doing that over the last year or year and a half, something like that, is that I don't want to become, one-dimensional. And a lot of people use this analogy of the wheel of life, as they call it, where it's kind of and there's diagrams for this, you can Google it, but there's this kind of visual picture of your life as a wheel, and there are different spokes coming out from the center of that wheel or the hub. And, usually it's something along the lines of family, relationship, career, financial, health, spiritual, you could fill in the blank. But if there's these different spokes on the wheel and you rate each one of those things from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, you might have a situation like I've experienced in the last year or so, where one of them is really strong, like a 9 or a 10, but then a lot of other ones are really weak. And so if you've got a lot of 1s and 2s or 4 and 5, and then 1, 9, or 10, or conversely, a lot of things that are in the higher spectrum, 8 to 10, something like that. And then there's one that's, a much lower number, 1 to 3, something like that. If you, draw this out, you'll see that it's an uneven wheel and it kind of clunks along. It's da-dunk, da-dunk, da-dunk. And while it's good to be strong in a certain area, I think balance is really important. And that's been my word for 2022. So that's an interesting way to think about it. I've done some of those exercises. And interestingly for me, the balance or imbalance in my life in that whole wheel and spoke model is almost the exact opposite as it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago, when everything was really good. I was in the best shape of my life, really strong, healthy relationships, and very intentional about a lot of things spiritually. And I hated my job. Now I love my job to the point where I'm probably spending way too much time doing it. And I've let these other things, not, out of any ill will, but just kind of neglect or, lack of intention fall to the wayside. So it's interesting for me as I've realized I've swung from one end of the spectrum to the other. But getting back to this idea of how do we actually maintain the intentionality. I don't like the discipline word as much because it usually is a failing proposition in my experience, when you're trying really hard to make yourself do something. And especially if you make it really extreme, so coming back to these ideas of small, little, but consistent daily or multiple times a day type of activities. So obviously exercise is one thing that can be a really healthy routine. First thing, I like to try to structure that where it's the first thing I do in the morning and before I even take a shower, right? I like to be efficient with my day. So I'd rather take one shower, all else being equal, than, two, where I'm certainly not against that if if it's because I worked out versus didn't work out, but I just usually like to start with that first thing in the morning. And usually those things that we prioritize, if they get done first thing in the morning, we know that that's going to be done and we don't put it off till later in the day, which many times means it doesn't actually happen, or it happens kind of, halfway. So, but also just building in little, like another thing that I am working on is I recently had to have a lot of dental work, which I know this kind of sounds random, but I've always had great teeth, never even had a cavity. And just because I got in this habit for the last several years of grinding and clenching my jaw and grinding my teeth, I actually had to have a root canal, several root canals, and permanent crowns put on 2 teeth because I had cracked them just from grinding throughout the day. And so I got this dental work done. I've got the permanent crowns on now, but my thinking is, well, if I don't change fundamentally this very daily, like multiple times a day habit, then I'm going to be right back in the same position I was before. And I'll have, spent all this time and money and effort to get these things fixed. And then it'll just, the crowns will crack again and I'll have to get, another procedure. And so I'm like, okay, how do I try to stop doing this? Right. And so there's a lot of different ways people talk about this. You can think of, a color, and every time you see a color, just remind yourself, okay, make sure I'm not clenching, make sure I'm not grinding my teeth. And you could apply this to anything, if it's, swearing, or if it's some nervous habit, whatever your version of this is. And, that might or might not work, but I realized I probably needed to take a little bit more intentional or even drastic action in the beginning. So today I actually just got, and this sounds really funny, I got Botox, which I always thought of Botox as this cosmetic procedure. It's actually it started off with medical uses. And so by putting that Botox in my masseter muscles right here, which are significantly overdeveloped from years and years of clenching and, building those muscles up, it actually kind of mitigates that and relaxes those muscles. And so I realized it's probably not enough. If I really want to be serious about this, I needed to do something, and it took some time. It took some money. It's something kind of bizarre I'd never thought of before, but sometimes that's an important part of really changing our lives, our habits, and getting maintaining that intentionality and consistency in whether it's a New Year's resolution or any kind of, positive habit pattern you're trying to build, or conversely, a negative habit pattern, in my case, that you're trying to discontinue. So it's both, and I'm really trying to be more cognizant of when I am doing these just kind of idiosyncratic, neurotic habits of grinding my teeth and having that awareness throughout the day. But I also realized I probably needed to initially take a greater degree of action to kind of interrupt that feedback cycle. So those are both things you could do. They don't have to be one or the other, but more than anything, I think if we're really serious about something, whatever it is, if it's getting in shape, stop grinding your teeth, spending more time in the Word and prayer with the Lord, and connecting with people, whatever it is for you, that usually that daily consistency, where it's not a big thing, it's just those little things very consistently over time that you almost kind of forget about. And then all of a sudden one day you wake up or somebody sees you and it's like, wow, you're not doing this anymore, or you are doing this thing. And I think that is probably a really important thing. We always want to have these, really grandiose visions of getting these massive action plans in place and taking this big step. But usually it's those little small steps that compound over time. And as a lot of you guys know, I work in financial services, and the idea of compound interest is a major financial principle, but I've also found that it's a very important life principle, that little things that you wouldn't think would be that important, when done consistently, uninterrupted for a very long period of time, it's absolutely mind-boggling the effect that that can have. So, one of the ways that I got back in shape years ago when I was really unhealthy and out of shape was, rather than trying to go out and run at the pace and the mileage I used to when I was, in high school with 4% body fat and could run really fast, which never worked. I'd go out and kill myself. I felt terrible. I'd injure myself, or I was really sore, and it wasn't sustainable. And so eventually I got to the point where I was just like, you know what? I am just going to go out and jog, not run, just jog for 20 minutes. I don't care how fast or how far I go. I'm just going to make the activity itself the win for the day. And then, I'll do 25 push-ups and 50 crunches, right? Which, especially being in the Navy, that was a joke. It seemed almost not even worth doing. But sure enough, that compounding effect, took place over time. And then I ended up getting in the best shape of my life. And then I've maintained that for most of the last 10 years or so. But for me, and maybe some of you guys, COVID really threw that for a loop. And there's no way I can use that as an excuse anymore. We were shut down, stay-at-home orders for maybe a month or two, depending on where you lived. For me in Colorado, it was probably about 2 or 3 months that the gym wasn't open. And it was really unfortunate because I had just gotten back into that routine, that momentum, consistency. I was just getting back in the zone, and then everything closed down. And I just haven't really recovered since then. And there's no excuse for it. And it's not something that I don't know how to do. I have been in extremely good physical condition, extremely good health, and overall kind of peak physical state. So it's not something that I haven't done or that I don't know how to do. I just haven't been doing it. And I had to make an intention. And I, by the way, just so you guys know, I am a coach myself, but I also receive coaching, and I pay for that, and I value that engagement. And so I was like, I need to really prioritize this, make myself accountable, and set this very intentionally as a goal. So I had a coaching appointment with my coach about a week ago, and told him, here are the things I really want to work on. And just by saying that, just by telling him and writing it down, a list of 5 or 6 things that I wanted to be intentional of working on this year, sure enough, the next morning I woke up, went to the gym, ate healthy, started making, plans to go have fun and recreation, which is another part of my balance for this year. And, reconnected with like 3 or 4 people within the next 24 hours. And it was really engaging. It really fed my soul. And it was good to just feel like I'm actually making progress towards this thing that I set out to do. And so next week, I'm going to be going to the mountains for a couple of nights to stay with my really good friend that I'll be able to catch up with in person, and go out and enjoy my new snowboard setup and this, this pass that I got for the season, which I didn't even use last year. And so I was like, man, just by having that conversation with my coach, I really started to make some progress, because I'm like, okay, I've made this top of mind for myself as well as someone else that I'm accountable to. And then I sent him a picture when I was in the gym, and updated him, hey, just booked this 2 nights in the mountains with my friend. And, it was just nice to be able to set the intention, follow through on it, and then send some feedback to myself and somebody else that kind of reinforces it. And so obviously I need to stay consistent in that. One day is not a victory in itself, but it's one day after one day after one day, all strung together again with that compounding effect, that consistency, persistence over time, that can make a big difference. And I've still got a long way to go. I really regret I'm in, probably some of the worst shape I've been in my life. And I've let myself go in a variety of ways because I was so focused. And yes, I was productive. I was very profitable, made some major progress in one area of my life, but again, at the expense of others. So if you guys are listening to this and you're kind of in that same place where you've done really well in one place, maybe you're a 9 or a 10 on that, wheel and spoke model, but you're a 1 or a 2 or something less than you'd like to be in the other ones, and you're kind of lopsided and not, running smoothly like a balanced tire would or a wheel. Or if you really haven't made any progress in any way that you can think of as important, but want to just get started, whatever the case is, just set that intentionality to yourself, most importantly. But I really encourage doing it with someone you're accountable to. And that could be one of us on the Vision Possible team, the coaching team. It could be someone in the community here in the Vision Possible, one of the fellow visionaries, or just someone in your life. But take those little steps and focus on those little consistent day in, day out, multiple times a day things. And if you need to take a little bit more action like I did to kind of jumpstart the process, then do what you got to do. But I just wanted to follow up because, again, this is that time of year where most people tend to really fall off those, best well-intentioned goals to start the year. And I just kind of wanted to follow up as a reminder to myself, as much or more than any of you guys listening or watching this. But I think that it's good to periodically check in. Don't beat ourselves up, but set that intentionality, take little steps consistently. It compounds exponentially over time. And if you found something that's working for you, then post that as a comment, share it with this community, share it with other people. And we'd like to celebrate your success with you, as well as be able to all hold each other to that intentionality that we set. So I hope that's hopeful and helpful and inspiring, as well as maybe a little convicting. I know it is for me, for you guys hearing this. And again, please give us your feedback. Let us know how you're implementing this, what's working, what you've seen other people do successfully. And hopefully we'll be catching up in the next call that we have next week in our Q&A, which, by the way, if you haven't signed up or registered for that, make sure you sign up. We'll be answering your questions live. We'll be going through any number of topics you guys want to discuss.